Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm wwII and in today's video I have 3 replays for you in the absolute beast that is the SU-152 Taran. This premium Soviet tier 10 tank destroyer is an absolute monster. It has a whole host of fantastic attributes that make this one of the most feared tank destroyers at tier 10 in the World War II game mode inside World of Tanks console, and many people, including myself, would say that this tank destroyer is overpowered or is borderline overpowered. And if you have a good player playing this tank, in some situations there is not much that you can do to stop this thing from taking you out of the battle very quickly indeed. So I'll be telling you why that is in today's video. To start off with, I'm going to tell you my commander and equipment setup should you wish to play the Taran, as I have done in the gameplay in the background. And then I will talk about how I play the Taran, watching over the gameplay that you're seeing in the background. I'll tell you how I play this tank to get the most out of the fantastic attributes that this tank has and to annihilate the enemy. So to start off with, I'm going to tell you my commander and equipment setup. In terms of my equipment, I run Advanced Loader, Advanced Optics and Advanced Concealment. And in terms of my commander, I run Sixth Sense, Born Leader, Rapid Loading, Steady Aim, Snapshot, Run and Gun, Camouflage Expertise, Muffled Shot and Green Thumb. And in just a little bit I'll tell you the updated stats of my commander and equipment setup to the stats of the Taran, and we'll see how much those stats have been boosted up to. But right now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Taran and the fantastic base attributes that the Taran has once you purchase this Soviet tier 10 premium tank destroyer. So in terms of its hit points, you have 1850 hit points, which is a little on the low side for a tier 10 tank destroyer, but this thing doesn't have any armor and it has insane concealment and a whole host of other fantastic areas where you can annihilate your enemy. So as a balancing feature, to have a little bit less hit points than other tanks, it isn't such a bad thing after all. In terms of its view range, it is a little lacking at 390 meters view range, but with the fantastic commander skills and equipment that you can get after the 6.0 update in World of Tanks console, then it isn't so much of an issue. And because of the fantastic concealment this tank has at 0.3 still concealment, you can kind of negate that pretty mediocre view range. And now we get on to one of the best attributes of this tank, and that is the gun. So as a 152.4mm gun, you're going to be expecting this tank to have a very good alpha damage, and it does have a very good alpha damage indeed, at 950 alpha damage on its standard and premium AP and heat rounds, and 1200 alpha damage should you penetrate the HE rounds that this tank has as its third ammunition choice. It has fantastic penetration on its standard AP rounds at 303mm of penetration, and fantastic heat round penetration at 395mm of penetration, meaning that you can go through super heavies like a knife through butter. And then if you want to fire the HE rounds, you are going to be dealing a hefty amount of splash damage, but if you penetrate with the 90mm of penetration, you'll be dealing that fantastic 1200 alpha damage that you can make work on lightly armoured tank destroyers, medium tanks and light tanks. And the shell velocity on this big caliber gun isn't too bad at all. On the standard AP rounds it's 960 meters a second, and on the heat rounds and the HE rounds it's 760 meters a second. Once you get used to leading at mid to long ranges, and you're seeing a little bit in the background here on Westfield in the gameplay, once you get used to it, it isn't too bad at all, and you can still make this gun work in a very good sniping location. So what makes the Taran so damn good? Well, it's just that it has a whole host of features of this tank that are near best in class, and that makes a tank overpowered because it has such good features in many different areas that in some situations there is nothing that you can do against your enemy. If it has better concealment, it has decent view range, better firepower, it's just going to obliterate you, especially if you are a newer player or you're more of a casual player, and maybe if you don't have a 9-skill commander. So in terms of the DPM that the SU-152 Taran has, it's the 5th best in this list I'm going to put up for you now, but technically it's the 3rd best DPM on a tank destroyer at tier 10, because the list includes the Death Star, the FV4005 and the Storm Tiger using their HE rounds, and of course that has less penetration, less likely to penetrate, so technically it's the 3rd best DPM on a tank destroyer at tier 10. In terms of its concealment, it's the second best concealment rating behind the Stritzfan 103B at 0.3 steel concealment, and you can see the SU-152 in the background. The Taran isn't a small profile tank, and I don't know why it has such damn good concealment. In terms of its alpha damage, it's the fourth best alpha damage at 950, behind tanks like the Jagdpanzer E100, Death Star FE 4005 and the Sturm Tiger. And it also has the joint third best standard penetration at 303mm and joint second best premium penetration at 395mm on its heat rounds. Add to that the great mobility, where you can go 63 kilometers an hour forwards, 18 kilometers an hour backwards, and 17.73, I should say, power to weight ratio, meaning that this thing has a combination of deadly attributes that you can utilize in many different situations and still come out on top. So with my commander and equipment setup added to the base stats of the SU-152 Taran, I now have a view range of 465 meters, a steel concealment rating of 237 meters, which is absolutely insane for a tank of this size, this profile. It's not a small tank. I have no idea why the steel concealment is so damn good. Of course, when you're playing it, it's fantastic, but when you come up against it, it can be very, very infuriating. However, once you are targeted, you are a larger profile and you don't have any armor at all, meaning that you will be taken out of the game very quickly if you don't use the fantastic mobility to get out of harm's way. In terms of my DPM, it's shot up to 4,152. I now have a 0.3 accuracy on the gun and a 2.49 second aim time, meaning that the gun handling is pretty damn good for a 152.4mm gun. And with the high caliber gun, it means you're going to be dealing more critical damages, setting more fires, dealing more ammo racks, and this thing is an absolute monster at tier 10, especially in a capable player's hands. And yeah, that's why this tank is considered so damn good. So in the background here on Westfield, you've seen that we've racked up 5.8k damage from this typical sniping location in the field. We've been using our light tanks and our other tanks to spot for us, but if we moved forward even more, the likelihood of us spotting for ourselves is very high on a map with good foliage that we can hide in to improve our concealment rating, and that's the reason why I've chosen a very concealment focused commander and equipment setup, and I've obviously got the optics in there to improve my view range to a point where I can spot for myself. And here you're seeing where the mobility comes handy at the end of the game, where I'm able to get across the battlefield and get the last couple of shots of damage in to boost up my damage rating and yeah, my win rate, and of course my WNA if you are interested in that kind of thing. You'll see there that we rolled lower I should say, sorry, than the 950 alpha damage, but you're still dealing sort of 800 to 900 alpha damage usually when you low roll, which is absolutely insane and on par with other tier 10 tank destroyers. And when you roll high, you can roll for over 1,000, which is absolutely beautiful. But that's it for the first game there on Westfield. We finish in the MVP slot with 5 kills, 7.2k direct damage, 732 assistance. That's only a second class, showing how well people are playing this tank. We get 1,422 base experience points. We made some silver in that game, and we had a very decent game indeed. So we're going to head on now into the second gameplay of today's video, and I'll talk you through how I like to play this tank. So you're joining me here on Vineyards in the second gameplay of today's video. We're here in the Taran on the eastern flank. It's an encounter game mode, so we're going to try and sit in a position where we can get some early shots off to tanks that are trying to get from the north and flank around to our sides. And the position right in front of us is a perfect place. This typical sniping position for tanks on Vineyards. There's a lot of tanks go in this direction. Some of them I was kind of hoping would move on and spot, but in this position we should be able to get a few spots off ourselves and get a few early shots off, and the early shots off that you get can be so fantastically powerful, especially later on when you come up against that tank and it's now on a sort of 1 or 2 shot and you've helped do that at the start of the battle. So our first shot of the game is a low roll, but we still do 888 damage, and what an insane thing to say that that's a low roll. This thing has crazy alpha damage, and when you high roll for over 1,000 it feels extra juicy, and yeah, extra enjoyable indeed. So in this game you're going to see a lot of their light tanks are going to come to a position where when we fire we are getting spotted, but we only are getting spotted when we fire, which just goes to show how good this concealment rating is. And what I like to do in a Taran when I'm trying to set up in a defensive location in a certain situation like we are here on Vineyards, is just pop up, get a shot off while you're stealthed, ambush a tank. If you get spotted, you fall back behind hard cover, get re-stealthed and pop up and rinse and repeat. And if you don't get spotted, then of course you can sit in the same location, maybe try and tweak it ever so slightly in case there are people trying to watch for your shell tracers or artillery that are watching your location from their sky view. So you do have to bear that in mind, and that's just basically how you play the Taran. You utilise the concealment rating, you boost up the view range as much as possible, and you ambush tanks and get shots in whenever they're spotted and absolutely chunk them down. And we get a lovely shot there finishing off that T95E6, and with this fantastic alpha damage, you know, anyone that's on around sort of 950 to 1000 hit points has a very good chance of you taking them out with one shot, which is a crazy thing to say. Usually that would only be a, you know, a Death Star FE4005 or a Jagdpanzer E100, or now even the Sturm Tiger that could do that. But with this 950 alpha damage, you have a very sweet spot in between tanks like Object T68 and the T110E4, T110E3, and you have all these extra attributes added to your tank, meaning that you are an extremely powerful force to be reckoned with on the battlefield and a very valuable player on your team. So you'll see me here just get re-stealthed, pop up and get shots in when I'm on reload. The DPM doesn't feel bad at all on the SU-152 Taran. With the DPM above 4000 on a high caliber gun that can, you know, roll very high, it can do good critical damage, set people on fire, you know, you can blow people's ammo racks off. It just feels absolutely phenomenal, and in a capable player's hands this thing can be an absolute monster. And even if you're a newer player or a more casual player, you're still going to have those games where if you play it sensibly, you are going to be dealing a heck of a lot of damage. So we get a lovely blind shot there into that Badger. I've loaded the heat rounds that have 395mm of penetration because that Badger was slightly hold down, but fortunately we got a shot into the side, so we didn't necessarily need the heat rounds. But for the purposes of this game, it's still fairly even. I just want to make the shots count at the moment, and I don't want to let that Badger get into a frontal hold down location, because even the 395mm penetration is going to struggle against the frontal hull of the Badger in most places, especially when he's well angled and hold down. So I want to try and get him out of the game early on. We get one of their light tanks out of the game, and that's the last light tank on their team, so that means their view range or their vision is now severely impaired, and we can hopefully push the tempo in this game and push on towards a victory. We get another shot there finishing off the T28 prototype. Low hit points, but with the fantastic DPM and reload that this tank has, it's not really an issue at all. So with my DPM of 4152 with my commander and equipment setup, my base reload time for the 950 alpha damage, or 1200 if you fire an HE, is 13.72 seconds, which is absolutely great, and the aim time doesn't feel too long at all. Sat there, we aim in on that Jagdpanzer E100, slap him in the side, and he's now one shot. And just by chunking off the enemies in this game, we have now pushed our damage total to 6.4k direct damage, 722 assistance. We're still full health, and now we can go forward with a 5 tank advantage, try and use our hit points and mobility to get the last shots off in this game and see what extra damage we can get out with this game. And the damage that we're doing in this game is kind of, it's not something that's rare in a tank like the Taran. I've been having very many high damage games that I wouldn't have in any other tank destroyer at tier 10, especially this consistently. And I'm seeing so many of the Tarans on the opposing teams played by, you know, players of all different abilities, and they're finishing in the top 3 quite often. There's slightly more of them that aren't played as well now that it was the tier 10 premium sale was like a couple of weeks or a month ago now, but it's still a very consistent tank, and it's just too consistent for tier 10 for most players that play this game, and that's, I reckon, why it's considered, or why it is overpowered or slightly overpowered, or maybe even you'll consider and say it's unbalanced. But you can take this one down fairly easily if you know what you're doing. Obviously you don't want to get into a position where you're just going to be outspotted with the fantastic concealment this tank has. you're going to want to try and negate that by getting up close and personal, firing HE at it, because it has absolutely no armour at all, and you should be able to penetrate it very easily indeed. The highest bit of armour on the tank is the frontal lower plate and the frontal part of the turret, which is only 30mm, meaning that you can penetrate this thing with HE and overmatch it very, very easily with a lot of tanks, and that's the strongest point of the tank. So once you are spotted, you are very liable to being taken out quickly, and of course as we're going forward here, you're seeing that we're losing our hit points in quite quick fashion. However, I was happy to take 1 or 2 shots here, or even die, to get a few extra hit points worth of damage in. We reload very quickly, and we even managed to take that mouse out just sitting in front of him. And whilst I was waffling on there, I managed to push the damage total of this game to 8.2k direct damage, 4 kills, 722 assistance, I should say. That's another high caliber, another MVP slot, and 1535 base experience points. And yeah, that's another second class, just showing the kind of epic game people have had in this tank. People are having 10, 11, 12k plus damage games in this tank. So that's it for that game there on Vineyards. I'm going to head on now into the third and final game. So we're now into the third and final game here on Duke Pass in the Taran. It's another encounter game mode, and we're just going to get into a position to try and get some early shots off like we did in the start of the last battle, and then we're going to try and relocate with the fantastic mobility that this tank destroyer has to where we are needed throughout the battle. As you can see on the map, on the mini-map there are the spawn points for the enemy team there in the north western corner and sort of towards the north central location, so we know where they're going to be likely coming from. I'm going to get into a position to try and ambush someone at the start of the game. Usually it's a rogue light or medium tank trying to do a scouting run, and if you're lucky you can get a nice big juicy damage to start off the game. I'm going to reverse into this position here because you are a rear mounted turret. It just allows me to get forwards quicker should I get spotted and get out of harm's way. Fortunately in this battle there's no sky piggies to dump on me and absolutely obliterate me from above. That is the one massive counter to this tank. But you can see there the fantastic concealment where that dragon ran out to try and spot enemies, and he got spotted with our view range, and we didn't get spotted ourselves. So we're just going to sit in this location for a little bit longer whilst we allow our heavies behind us to advance. I don't want to get caught out by one or more tanks here in this position without any support at all, and now we're going to push forward and try and spot what our heavies are spotting down beneath us, and see if we can get any nice juicy side shots here in this position. So let it load in, or aim in I should say, for a little bit longer on that 705A, and we do a slightly above average damage roll of 964 damage. We didn't get spotted at all, and we have some nice flanking fire into the sides of these tanks. We just have to reposition slightly, and unfortunately as we are doing so we do get spotted by one of those heavy tanks, it would appear. But we managed to pull forward. We snap a shot in with the auto aim, which I wouldn't recommend. I'd always try and aim in with this tank, but it just goes to show how good this tank is, that you can snap a shot in, not even fully aim, and deal over 1,000 damage to a poor, lonely tier 8 tank, which it feels nice when you're playing it, but when you're coming up against this thing and you're getting slapped from very campy locations, it can be incredibly frustrating, especially for like a new player or a casual player experience. So we are spotted here, so I'm just trying to move about as much as possible, because it seems that there's either a light tank in one of the bushes directly in front of where I'm looking now, out into the field, that is spotting me, and they have 3 tank destroyers on the enemy team left, and I don't want to get slapped by one of them and lose all of my hit points too early on. I want to try and save it for the mid to latter stages of the battle, where I can use my mobility, rush forwards and take a shot or two and deal some extra damage. I'm just going to wait for this Rheinmetall. I'm going to lift my gun so that hopefully it doesn't keep the detected symbol on for him. When you lift your gun like that, it means that he's just 6th sense. Maybe he's going to be more confident to push back up because he doesn't think anyone's looking at him, and then I'm going to reacquire my gun and fire at him. So that's a little technique or a little bit of advice for you if you didn't know that. That's something that you can do when you're in any tank, but especially in a tank destroyer. It works well, especially a sneaky tank destroyer where they don't know where they are getting detected from. So in this game we are down by 2 tanks. We're already up to just shy of 2k damage. We haven't done anything for a good sort of 30 seconds to a minute, so we're just going to relocate and see if we can get some shots towards the south. You don't want to sit for too long without getting your gun in the game, because your gun is such a fantastic gun and it can be the difference between a win and a loss. We're going to pop up on here in this large profile tank. I shouldn't be as confident as I am on this rock here, skylining myself to the whole of the enemy, but I am in the Taran because unless there is someone that I don't spot directly beneath me, there is no way they're going to spot me apart from my shell tracers here. And you just get to know the different sort of meters away that different tanks can be before they spot you. If you use your minimap, you can use the ratio between your view range and your concealment circle and just approximate where they're going to spot you from. And once you get used to it and you get sort of used to how the concealment and the view range acts in your Taran, once you've set it up, it just becomes quite easy to sort of guess when you're going to get spotted, guess when you're probably not going to be spotted, and yeah, outplay your opponents with the view range mechanics. So we're going to fire at this E100 through multiple layers of foliage, but he was quite close to us inside our concealment circle, so we do get a nice shot into him, taking our damage total to 2.8k damage, but he does spot us, so we're going to get behind hard cover, re-stealth, and we're going to see if we can go around and get another shot into him. We've gone to a slightly different location because we expected him to be looking this way, because he's taken a shot from this way and we were spotted. And it's just little things like that, making sure your movements are a little bit more unpredictable on ridgelines and in bushes, and surprising your enemies and ambushing them. This is the ultimate predator tank destroyer. You're going to pop up in bushes behind rocks, come out, snapshot people and obliterate them. And this Concept 1B, for a lot of tank destroyers, 931 hit points, you wouldn't expect to take them out with one shot, but there's a good likelihood that I will roll high and take out this Concept 1B. I'm going to rock forward as he comes through, and we just obliterate him from the game. And now, yeah, we are 2 tanks up in this game, and the roles have been reversed. Now we are in the sort of dominating force. We're now 3 tanks up, and it's about that time that I use my hit points and my ability to go forwards and get some extra sort of damage for my team. I knew that there would be tanks coming from the south, as all of our tanks are towards the sort of central northwestern location. We get behind some hard cover, get a shot into that SU-101, take our damage total to 4.6k damage. We're hiding behind this house until we are re-stealthed. I'm expecting there to be tanks coming from that way, so my turret's looking that way. And we're going to try and get into a position where we can spot out and get some extra damage at the end of the game. And this is where keeping your hit points intact at the start comes in handy. I'm able to go forwards, use my concealment with my view range and my hit points to get out, spot enemies for my team, and help take this game down whilst also boosting my damage and my XP numbers. So we go through the side there of that 16801P, very easy tank to penetrate in a tank that has such good penetration like the Taran. We are firing the heat rounds. It's not necessary, I probably would have penetrated that one anyway, but he was slightly angled, so I didn't want to take any risks. I wanted to have as much of a good game as possible, and we get our second shot there, finishing him off in 2 shots. And now we haven't got to reload for too long until we go in on this E100, and there's just 2 heavy tanks left. I can take sort of 1 to 3 shots depending on how high these tanks roll. We don't get spotted by that Camp 7 there, even though we are directly in front of him. It's just the Taran doing Taran things there. It's just an absolutely fantastic tank destroyer. Very, very strong. Definitely borderline overpowered, if not overpowered. And if you can get your hands on it and you like tank destroyers, I highly recommend this tank. But yeah, be wary when they're on the enemy team, because if they're played by even the slightest bit of competence, then they can still be a very big nuisance to you. So we rock out here, we've got a heat round loaded, so we should be able to go right through the front of the Panzerkampfwagen 7. I say sorry as I blocked a shot from the heavy behind me. I really didn't mean to do that. But I had to try and get out of the way, because I don't want to take a shot if I don't have to, although I am willing to. Like now, take a shot from my team. We roll high on the E100, dealing over 1,000 damage, and we're hoping that he doesn't get taken out by our team in the meantime. I'm going to try and ram him just to track him, but yeah, E100's weight are a lot heavier than I am, and that's it for that game, as our E100 takes out his you want the 100 on the enemy team. But that's it for the third game there. We finish in an MVP slot again with 2 kills, 8.6k direct damage, the high caliber, another second class, just again showing how good this tank is, 1410 base experience points. A nice profit there, I think it was during a tier 10 silver week, and we blocked 400 damage somehow off of the non-existent armor the Taran has, and that's just how you play the Taran. You use the concealment, you use your commander and equipment setup to outspot your enemies, use the view range mechanics, use your alpha damage to chunk off your opponents, save your hit points for the end if you can, and go in and trade effectively and win your battles. And of course these are cherry-picked games, however you have a lot more damage or high damage games in the Taran. It's a lot more consistent with those high damage number games or even average games than all of the other tier 10 tank destroyers, in my opinion, making it so fantastically powerful. But I hope that you've enjoyed today's video. Thank you all so much for watching. Keep an eye out in September for the 1000 subscriber giveaway celebration. I'll let you know when that happens, and until next time, I'll see you on the battlefield, and bye for now.